All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up? Yes, okay. So good morning. My name is Insiya Bream, and I am the Registrar for University of Maryland Global Campus.
Darragh McNally, I'm AVP for Research and Assessment at UMGC.
And we're here today to talk to you about a pilot that we ran around the Comprehensive Learner Record. But to start off, I'd like to give you a little bit of context in terms of what our institution offers and who our students are, because we based our entire CLR design off of that. So we're a large institution with about 90,000 students, and we've got 3 divisions worldwide. We've got stateside, we've got a division in Asia, and a division in Europe. So we are truly global in that way. Our student population is mainly adult learners, and 80% of them are employed in some way, either full-time or part-time, and about 60% of our overall population is somehow affiliated with the military. So when we were thinking about, what kind of record would best support our students, we really decided that what we wanted to do was focus on the learning from within the classroom and to give them the ability to articulate their skills. So when I talk about our students, again, they're already affiliated with employers, and they're coming back to UMGC for a very specific reason, to gain additional skills, for a career change, for a promotion. And so, we thought that really focusing in on their learning within the classroom is the direction that we wanted to head. In addition to that, employers also think in terms of skills and not necessarily the degree the student's earning. The military is also kind of looking at the skills direction. So I don't know if any of you have heard of the initiative through the DoD called Mill Gears. But that is a pilot that the military is trying to move forward, where it gives students the autonomy to have a portfolio, and all of their records, their JST, and their other military training and experiences can go into one place and then be transferred digitally. Ultimately, I think the most important thing, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's, the ability to transfer the data is ultimately what our future state would like to be. It's not just about the record, but it's about digitally capturing this data and then giving the student the autonomy to send it wherever they need to digitally. Okay, so just really quickly, I want to go through kind of sort of how we got to our implementation plan. So I told you we kind of based it on who our students are and what a CLR would mean to them. And then it's kind of like, where do we start? So with such a large population of students and a boatload of administrators, I think, just sitting down and talking to them about what a CLR is and what it could do was not enough. And so we took the approach of wanting to create a prototype so that we would have a visual, and we wanted to take this visual and then basically show the value and expand it from there. And that kind of brought us to our implementation plan. So essentially, we decided to focus on one of our programs, one of our largest programs, which is the Master of Business Administration program. And we did this for a few reasons. One is because this program had moved to more of a competency-based learning model. So it's project-based. And students take classes in a sequence. And so we didn't have to necessarily worry about transfer credit or other things. It was very straightforward in what we could do. In order to design our CLR, we actually partnered with Parchment, and they helped us kind of craft a design that works for our institution based on our branding. And then we launched our CLR, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. But really, our focus was to evaluate this pilot. So we picked a starting point based on what we know, but we wanted to learn more. So, what did our students think of it? What do alumni think of it? And what do employers think of this document? So we have some screenshots here of what our document looks like, so I'm just going to briefly walk you through this. So essentially, this first page is really just an overview. So it gives you some context in terms of catalog language describing the program. It shows you a quick snapshot of where that student is in terms of progression towards their degree, and it gives you kind of like accreditation information. The second page here really gives you an idea of the class the student's currently in, what projects they're taking, and what projects they've accomplished. So we did this to serve a few different purposes. One is we wanted students to be able to use the language directly, like in an interview, or to take it and help them with their resume. In addition to that, we really wanted to focus on this concept of learning along the way. So it's not just about the degree the student ends up with. It's, if they're already attached to an employer, they can go to their employer and say, hey, these are the skills and competencies I see in this job that I want next. And here's how my learning at UMGC has helped me get to that point. So it's kind of like allowing them to obtain promotional opportunities while they're studying. So we're also kind of dabbling with badges as well. And we sort of wanted to partner a comprehensive learner record along with badges. So we were able to work with faculty within the MBA program to come up with 4 badges that really represent learning throughout the program. So the idea is that a student could earn 0 badges, they could earn up to 4, and it's an accumulation of learning. So it's not just based on one course, but kind of throughout the program. If they hit the 3 or 4 or 5 targets that are needed for business communication, then they will earn that badge. Sorry, I think we moved screens a little fast. So,
I'm sorry.
oh, no worries. So this is really exciting. No, you can go back. We're good with this.
GWP.
Yeah. Okay. So this is really exciting. It's another way that we're sort of, trying to explore badging. So there was a group of employers in the Baltimore to Richmond corridor that came together and said, these are the skills that we would like our employees to have. And so we were part of this Greater Washington partnership, and with the Capital Collab, they decided to provide students with these badges. So to date, we've issued about 300 of these badges, which is more than the other 17 institutions who are part of this, and we're really hoping to kind of grow this. This is called a digital generalist credential, and the different topics there are the things that we are saying the student has proficiency in. Okay, so this kind of brings us to our launch, and we started really planning this out in February 2020. So UMGC has had some prior experience with a CLR. We were part of the initial pilot that ACRO and NASPA and the Lumina Foundation supported. And so we were kind of able to have a really good timeline from the time that we began planning this to the launch. And you can see here from the slide that we've issued 6,000 CLRs to date. 70% of those have been claimed, meaning that the students have gone into their Parchment portal and downloaded the document, and 10% of those have been shared on social media, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. And now I'm going to turn it over to Darragh to talk to you about what we learned through our evaluation.
Thank you. Okay, so as we mentioned at the start, we're interested here in, went ahead too quickly there. There we go. So we're interested in 3 groups, right? We've got our students who got the CLR. We also took advantage of an alumni group that was willing to give us some feedback and talk to us. And of course, our employers. So we were able to have a focus group with employers that are involved in UMGC and, represent different types of industries and were willing to give up their time. So that was a huge opportunity for us to get real. It's all real-world feedback, but the employer is a little more real-world feedback, maybe, So what does success look like? When we were trying to determine how are we going to decide if this project is a success, we need to know if anyone is using the CLR. So as we saw, most people were going into Parchment and accessing it, which is pretty impressive given that, you often hear how many digital badges go unused, right? So these were not going unclaimed. People are actually going into Parchment to access it and look at it. Then we surveyed students to know how they are using the CLR. So if they're looking at it, but they're not taking advantage of the opportunity to bring it to their employer or help with their resume, then maybe it's a lost opportunity. And then, as I said, how do alumni and employers react to the CLR? Because it's not students are not the only end consumers of this, right? We need to understand how everyone interprets this and consumes it. So as I mentioned, we've got surveys of students, we've got a survey and presentation for alumni, and a focus group for some employers. So not surprisingly, most of the students had never heard of the CLR before. I forgot to put the sample size in here. I should say this was our first kind of tranche of students who were awarded the CLR. So it was about 1,100 students, and we had a maybe 10% response rate. So this is about 100 people, you know, give or take, depending on the question. So most people had never heard of a CLR before. Nonetheless, most indicated it would be very or extremely useful. And a lot of what we got from the survey and the alumni survey is really the rich qualitative comments. So I've got a lot of text on these slides. Forgive me, I'll read it to you. You don't have to read it. But I think that's really where the meat is in this. So why don't you think the CLR will be useful to you, for the people who indicated that they didn't think it would be very useful? The main two things I think that jumped out was not enough information given, and it's just a condensed copy of the syllabi and course descriptions. So I think for the first one, this is something that we see coming up again and again. I think we definitely take that point because we've only got the current projects in the current iteration of the CLR. So if you're enrolled in MBA 620, you see detail on those projects, but you don't see detail on your previous projects. So that's something that we need to work on. It's just a condensed copy of syllabi and course descriptions. That might be true to some extent, but certainly the badges aspect, I think, brings this to the next level. Maybe this person didn't get many badges. I didn't think to check that. But you know, when we look at the badging that we were able to bring into the CLR, it takes the information beyond the traditional container of just the course to say, okay, there's an international business project in the first course, the third course, and the seventh course. You might not even realize this is a skill set you have. This is something you're good at. So maybe we need to make that a little more clear. But when we asked what we could add to make it more useful in the future, again, we get the more detail issue come up, which I think is really kind of heartening to see because, you know, in higher ed, we're talking about skills all the time, but here what we see is this is actually what students want too. They want to be able to say, this is the skill that I learned in this course. This is, you know, the very specific project that I was able to do, and I can bring that to my employer. It has value when there's specificity. They want project level data for every course, which really gets to the fact that the rendering of the CLR that we have in this first iteration of the pilot is static. So what we would love to see in the future is you can click on any course and it gives you all the detail that you need, but for this first iteration, that wasn't the case, and so that was something that was repeatedly called out really by students, that they want to be able to go in there and click around and get more detail than what we're giving them. And specific grade data, which again I think gets to the interactive nature of the future state that we hope to get to. So when we ask again what could we add to make it more useful, this first quote was, I recommend that each course be broken out in detail to provide a detailed description of what subjects and skills are taught in the course. That way the CLR would provide a comprehensive collection of all the subjects and skills taught throughout the entire program. So it's almost like we're prompting them to say skills here, but we're not. So students are coming to this on their own, and they see the value of us moving towards a skills model, which I think is really encouraging. The second quote here is basically the same thing. They want to be able to say, when they go into a job application, it's not just that I've done this course, which may or may not contain what you need. I can show you exactly that I learned the skill that you say you need, so I can do this job for you. We wanted to make sure that, you know, it was an easy process to find the CLR, because of course if people can't access the portal, then it doesn't matter how high quality the contents are. But luckily most people really had no problem accessing it through the CLR. And this is a nice feature of Parchment, who we partnered with for this, because the Parchment portal is the same place where you get any degrees that you have earned or your academic transcript. So everything is kind of in there in a one-stop shop for students. Similar stuff coming up when we ask what else would you like us to know. They want it to be shorter, but there's definitely, students are seeing the value of this, right? They see the value of being able to take information on what they've covered to their employer, which was really wonderful to see, that this person can use this to have a conversation about what they're learning at UMGC and how they can, you know, maybe take on new responsibilities or progress in their careers. So next we move to alumni. For the alumni group, this is a much smaller group. This is an alumni board at UMGC that has agreed to participate in projects like this and other ways that they can help UMGC and weigh in on different projects and initiatives. So we presented to them, we recorded a presentation of the CLR to them, and then had a survey that was really very similar to what we had for our students. Again, most had not heard of the CLR before seeing the prototype, but most thought it would be somewhat or extremely useful. I added in the little comment here because, you know, one person can really skew the data when you've got such a small sample size. And this person said, it's not useful for me, I'm retired, which is not really in the spirit of what we were asking, but nonetheless, most people thought it was useful. So when we asked them what they would add, again, they wanted it to be interactive, which we saw for our students. They wanted more detail, in this case, better description of the badges, which is, I definitely take the point there. I would love in a future iteration when it's interactive to be able to click on the badge and get a lot of the metadata pop up there so you can really see what the badge signifies. It was interesting that they, I guess it makes sense, having graduated and had more post-college experience and maybe done a lot of workplace training. They're thinking of this as a lifelong learning record, which we're not at this point. But they certainly are kind of looking to the next step even to say, this is great, and now how do I get my, you know, my workday training or whatever else it might be in there so that we can have everything in the one place. When we asked what they would add to the CLR, again, people want to know more detail, and they appreciate having everything in the one place, which I think is kind of what we were going for. Here the student, or this alumni wrote, I can see significant advantages for the students participating in the program by allowing them to create and maintain a lifelong learning record that will help students and employers assess an individual's strengths and weaknesses. So again, this person is already going to the next stage of how do we get this to be a lifelong learning record beyond the program, which I think is really cool because that's, of course, something that we talk about, but we just are not there yet. What am I doing for time here? Good, okay. So next, we were lucky enough to have a focus group of some large employers. We've got, you know, fast food, technology, government contracting, so a nice representation of people who were able to come and speak with us. And for them, again, we just presented this CLR, told them what we were trying to do, and we wanted to get their feedback on, is this intelligible? Does this make sense? How would you use this? So it was really positive overall. They really felt that it was intuitive. They got what we were trying to do. They commented it's similar to a degree progress report, which is, you know, they saw as a plus, whereas previous student comments had said, well, I don't see the value. It's like a degree progress report. But as employers, they really saw the value in that because they want to have those conversations with their employees about what they're learning and how they can, how they're upskilling, how they could maybe take on extra responsibilities. They love, again, the ability to share details about their strengths. And I think possibly the most interesting thing was that they said, you know, even they admitted as employers, we really want specific skills and the degree is just a proxy. So they saw the CLR as the student being able to very clearly say, I have this skill you want, even though you've put the degree on there, you may not really necessarily need the degree, but you do need the skills, and here is exactly where I have learned them. And I've got evidence that I can do this job for you. They were, I think, unanimous that they wanted us to think about how we could bring this into Workday or an HR system. You know, definitely beyond the scope of this pilot, but I think it does speak to the importance of using the IMS standard, because once we have HR systems that are interested in this, and once this gathers steam, we'll very easily be able to transmit the data to an HR system as well as other universities. They indicated that this was too long, which I think once we have an interactive rendering of this, we'll get rid of that issue, because you'll be able to click on the areas where you would like more detail, and it won't be, you know, a daunting, potentially 3 or 4 page document. It'll be just one page that you can interact with as you need to. And they said, similar to students, they want even more specificity on skills, right? They want to see what skill has a student actually learned, and they even said what technologies has a student used, or are they proficient in. So certainly more weight around us moving towards a skills model from the employers as well. So for our next steps, we did see this as a success. We had really high usage of this. Students were positive about it. Employers were positive about it. We got good feedback on what we need to keep doing. This is just the first iteration. It's not the final product. So we're going to expand the number of students that receive a CLR. On the one hand, that will take care of itself because more students keep coming into the MBA program. They'll get the CLR just like the people who are there right now. But we're also going to move beyond just this one program. So we've got an undergraduate program that we're going to create a CLR for in the coming months. We do want to expand the evaluation part too and try to get a focus group of non-users to see why did you decide not to go into the portal and get your CLR? Is this something that we need to be better about communicating the value of this to our students to make sure that everyone uses it and takes advantage of it? I think a lot of what we got in the feedback was that this needs to be interactive, it can't be static, and so we are going to continue to explore technology solutions to improve the user experience for the students and employers. Again, the important thing is the underlying data, and the technology just helps with the rendering, right? What does it look like for the user? So that's something that we can and will continue to improve on. And I think there's also, aside from the interactive thing, the other really big takeaway for me, I think, is that people really do want this skills model, right? Students are saying, I want detail about what skills I've learned. The employers are saying, we need more detail about the skills people have learned. And we discovered we were kind of limited in the way that we gather our data at UMGC. Part of the benefit of using this MBA program is that it's a competency-based program. But the way that we record the data is quite traditional, right? We record the grades for the assignments. We don't necessarily have the data on every competency for every assignment. That was never an issue before because nobody had tried to do it. But we're really, we're seeing a lot of momentum at our institution as we show people what we can do with the CLR. It is creating momentum around us moving towards a situation where our data are being recorded in a way where we can very easily render more detail on the CLR. So it's great to see so many things happening at the same time that are really all coming together. We'll also continue to work with employers to make sure that what we're doing is in line with what they want, and I think continue to use the IMS standard because, as I said, ultimately it's the underlying data which are important here, and the rendering is something that can be changed and updated as we go along. But the underlying data is really what's important as we all continue to develop these kinds of products. All right. Questions? Do we have a mic?
I think you need a microphone,
Yeah.
so just one moment.
We do have a question from the virtual audience, which we'll go to first. Interesting results, and I appreciate the detail on your design process. What were the sample sizes for your feedback from students and alumni? Were there challenges in preparing to generate response rates you were looking for?
Yeah, so like I said, I forgot to put up the sample size. It was about 1,100 students, and that was from the first group that when we initially awarded the CLR. So it was 1,100. We got about a 10% response rate, so about 100 students are in the sample up here. Definitely lower than we would have liked, but I think we usually get around a 40% response rate when we survey students, and that's when we are able to get a really interesting hook in that first question. So for this, we weren't able to do that, but I think just given the size of our student population, even getting to 100 is not what we'd like, but it's it's okay. For the alumni group, it was much smaller because it was a small group. So there we had 75% response rate, but it was only 12 people. So.
And we didn't really do any additional marketing around this.
Yeah.
So the initial communication that went out from Parchment that instructed students on how to obtain the document was really our main marketing.
Yeah.
So considering that, I think if we want a better response rate in the future, that's definitely something we'll consider, is just how to continue to bring it to the forefront, potentially bring it into the LMS, have faculty also, promote it. So there's lots of things we can continue to do.
Hi. Great work, first of all, and thank you for doing this because I think it informs, folks here and where our future is headed. When students, I love that you tracked that students were accessing their CLR. And I'm guessing you got that data through Parchment. Is the export a PDF then that the student would get? That's number one. And number two, when they shared it like on LinkedIn, I'm assuming mostly LinkedIn, what was that format in?
Yeah, so it is, it's a PDF that the student sees. I'm not sure what the data format is for LinkedIn. I think, on the user experience side of it, you click on share to LinkedIn and you log in, and so it just kind of pairs it. So I'm not sure what the data on the back end are there.
And had you considered having students do reflection associated? And that might be something that's done through the coursework, but there's an opportunity to advance the students' metacognitive skills. Obviously, it's a high impact practice in many ways when they look at a portfolio of this nature and observe where their gaps are, where their strengths are. I'm imagining in your next iteration that may be part of it.
Yeah, we hadn't thought of that. It's a good idea. The way that maybe it's just a function of how we work at UMGC, we would think of coursework as being completely separate from this, just because we have so many faculty. It would need to be something that's changed in the model classroom. But as this becomes standard, and almost all MBA students now will have this, we could, consider working it into the curriculum. It's a good idea. I can share my mic. Well, I'll repeat your question so that the people online can hear it. Yeah, so the question was, with the digital badges that we have in the CLR, are we tracking how we're sharing them? So no, the digital badges, the GWP badge, which if you are in the MBA and you earn the GWP badge, it'll be in your CLR, but it's also a standalone badge. So the badges within the CLR currently, the ones based on curriculum, are not standalone badges. So you would share the whole CLR as a unit. Yeah. Which I guess gets to the question of, is it a badge if it's, if you can't take it out, but that's another session maybe. Yeah, and I can repeat it, yeah. Yeah, so the question is, are we thinking of rolling it out to non-credit programming as well as credit bearing, and how will that impact how it's designed?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So as we're working more and more with employers on different partnerships, it's an interesting conversation because, it's kind of like on the employer side, they don't necessarily have something like a transcript, right? So they, they would love to have something that they've been sending us things like through a student, like digitally. And then there's this question about, how do we send things back? And these are for non-credit offerings. So this is, I think it could be a really great use case for that. We haven't necessarily explored it, but we're starting to have those conversations with our corporate team that is working more and more with employers on like, how can we exchange this data? Where does it live? What does it mean? Can we, as an institution, consider that it's official? And on the employer side, how can, if they don't have the means to necessarily craft something like a transcript, how do they get us that information where we can then ingest it and it can be a part of that student's record? So those are definitely conversations that we're having right now, but we haven't necessarily explored that avenue just yet.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions related to, it seems like a key element here is that you're establishing competencies based upon projects in classes in this MBA program, right?
Right.
Okay. Who populates the projects in the, CLR? Is it the faculty? Is it the students? Who actually puts it in?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I fully understand, but so the project is in the course, the project gets a grade in the LMS, those data go into the data warehouse, and then the data warehouse data goes into the CLR, and then the badge is something that it's something that the faculty actually decided on based on their content knowledge. They said, you know, if you, even though we don't have a global business class, these 4 projects are global business. And so if you get a certain grade in those, you automatically get the badge. Is that?
It's based on a rubric.
Okay.
So the faculty will fill out that rubric,
Right,
and then
yeah.
that data flows into our data warehouse, and then we can extract it from there into the CLR.
Okay, and so if somebody's going in like an employer, they're seeing not just the project, but they're seeing the specific way in which the project was operationalized by the student, by herself or in the team she was working in. There's a product, and then there's the rubric evaluation that the faculty did, correct?
So not in what the end user sees here in the CLR. But yes, those data are there, and so as we continue to iterate, we are having the conversation around, do we include the maybe student work in there, which makes it more of a portfolio? Do we want to bring in student work? Or potentially we could bring in the project detail, but not the actual work the student did. So that's kind of future state. Right now it's not in there.
Okay. Last question here. Early on in the presentation, you indicated, at least from the student's perspective, I think, it was that it's not a skill gap that we're dealing with here, but it's an articulation gap. But the term articulation is that, and of course there's lots of connotations for what articulation means. Is it how one goes about explaining how they got the skills?
Yeah, and in this case, it's the ability to articulate their learning from within the classroom. So it's really, the onus is completely on the student in this iteration of our CLR to take that information and to use it in a meaningful way. So whether that's, like I mentioned before, just, using that language within an interview to fully explain how they accomplish something, or to, really use that language that's right in front of them and say, like, okay, I can use these words and this in my resume to explain how I achieved this accomplishment.
Do you provide any training to that end?
No, we do not. And I think that's a really interesting question, right? Because, I think eventually this does not need to be standalone. I think this needs to be embedded within our admissions processes, our advising processes, and kind of throughout. I think faculty need more awareness around this, because essentially, like, if this is a tool that we're giving the student, it does need to kind of be embedded in their entire kind of life cycle at the institution.
Well, they have to know how to use it.
Absolutely.
Right, and
yeah.
that might account for some of those issues that you had of, usability and what have you, because they think, well, what do I do with this?
That's a
How
great
do I
call
use it?
out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Time?
Good. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much.